I've just introduced myself as Buck Harrison. I'll be instructing this course tonight on the public land survey system. I just spoke a moment to the class that's here tonight. I earn my living as a land surveyor, and I'm employed by the city of Bellevue. Have been on their staff for 10 or 12 years, and prior to that, a consultant to them. But I started land surveying with respect to the public land survey system in Lane County. It's out of Eugene, Oregon. And it was a great teaching there because I had wonderful mentors, and they taught me the basis of this system and what actual evidence was and what the original surveys were trying to do. But if you can imagine, like any of us, that development falls off, we get hungry, we pick up and we move to another place, and that has taken me to Texas and Alaska and other places, and now the last couple of decades back here. What I think would be helpful to us as we move into our study tonight is to break this down principally in these top 3 subjects, and we'll see if we can't segment our time with a topic and a break and a topic and a break and get through it. Then, if time permits, we'll actually do what's referred to as a breakdown of the section. Let me first understand, of the 2, 4, 6 here tonight, are any of you regularly work in the office? Good. Rest field guys. So as I speak to these things, the office folks will see some things, some vernacular that are familiar to them, but it's the field guys that are actually sniffing it out and tying it to the as we look at the system, we'll see how it covers the country, but more principally how it covers this local area and how it was developed. How it was developed is the history of it, and then even more specifically right here in these 2 or 3 or 4 townships. Now, one thing I would like to do different this year is from time to time take this presentation and make reference to an analogy of a subdivision plan, because that's something I suspect, particularly if you're in the private sector, that you can all kind of identify with. These elements are how we're going to go through our study tonight. But from time to time, I'm going to point to something over here. Plat has a design. It has a survey. Approvable. And a sale. Certainly there are more components to it than just that. But I think if I jump in between, we'll start to see what was done then, which is kind of esoteric and theoretical to most of our thinking. But how those principles fit snugly into this. Now, I give you full invitation and liberty to just grunt and moan or ask questions as we go. Please do that, and we'll just stop on a dime and take care of it. I pointed to this, is that where?
No, you don't even have to point, just roll the little wheel back.
To this? The receiver is somewhere.
Just hold it down. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. This is where we're going to start tonight, where we're going to finish the legal description. I might ask, this whole slide presentation was on your servers. Did any of you pick some up? Oh, great. Thank you.
I don't have one.
And I don't have one for you either.
Okay.
So, but it's available for you. Something I want to note here and pull out, we're going to be talking about this when I mentioned the term vernacular a few minutes ago. What these three descriptions share in common with respect to the public land survey system. We have some orientation to north 165 feet, south 500, whatever. 2, a section, township, and a range. Reference to something here called the Willamette Meridian. That type of description is called, we refer to as an allotment part or a subdivisional description, by contrast to this one, which we refer to as a meets and bounds description. But look at the preamble as opposed to the body. The preamble, again, recites section, township, range, and reference to some meridian. 2 different types of descriptions, 2 different places, same thing in common. Now, here's a description probably for an easement within a subdivision lot. In here, the preamble is just reciting the plat, meaning the lot, and the recording information for the plat. No reference to the section, township, and range until, ta-da, oh, here's that plat. Now I can't expand it here, but right in this area, it says description right here, right in that area, it's described as some portion of the section, township, and range, reference to some meridian. So all those things in common, they are unique to any boundary survey within our public land survey system. And when we're in the office and we are charged with performing a boundary survey, that's what we're after, to retrace that parcel, and that parcel is described just like those descriptions show. There's a strong reliance on the description. A serious responsibility in how we write them, which will be another course for you a few weeks from now. But what those descriptions do, or excuse me, how they're structured, is based off of the system that is over 200 years old. And that's what we're going to try to get our head around tonight. The system that I speak of, we'll see this in a minute. The system covers 30 states out of the 50 that we have. And we'll take a look at those 50 in the context of the system a few slides from now. But I started off by saying that the unique elements of the legal description that we saw are section, township, and range, in reference to something. The next 3 slides I'm going to be jumping back and forth with. Section. This is showing one section out of 36. It is defined as a nice square box, 640 acres in quantity. It is a mile square. It is controlled by 4 section corners, at each of the 4 quarters and by 4 quarter quarters at the midpoints of the sides. They're called quarter quarters even though they're in the half-mile section, right? It's a half mile here because they divide the section into quarters. This is the further subdivision of the section, where this is the southeast quarter of section 36. This guy over here is the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of section 36, and is an example of the very first description we saw in the first slide, the Allen part. Note that this section is 1 of 36. They're all a mile, so that makes it 6 miles, north and south, east and west. You put the 6 together in that nice little 36 section box. That's referred to as the township. Section, township, and range. A note as to the units of measurement. I said a mile and half mile and so forth. In the day, they didn't measure with pocket tapes, they measured with chains that had links in them. And the chain was 66 feet long. And within the chain, there were 100 chain links. So we have links and chains. When you multiply 66 feet times 80 chains, you get 5280. So when I'm saying that this is a mile square, or 5,280 feet, these original surveys were measured in 80 chains and 40 chains. So throughout our discussion, we're going to be talking about 80 chains east and west, 40 chains north and south, and on and on. I use the term aliquot. It's a French word. And the definition of that means a division where there is no excess or deficiency. So if I put something in here and say that this is the southwest of the northwest, it is, I should turn it on. Okay. That's suggesting that there is no remainder. You know, if we were to say the east 300 feet as opposed to the west 300 feet, and you only have 500 feet in there, you're going to have an overlap in there. So that's what aliquot parts does not run into. This distance, again, this is the half mile, so this would be a quarter mile, 20 chains, 320 feet. That is a distance that would have been considered as 20 chains when it was done. 320 feet, but who knows? It could only be 1,200 today because of the way the section was originally surveyed compared to how it was described and how we find it today. But whatever the distance is, this is the key, is that the same principles go into it. It's divided in the same way that it was originally, so that there's no overlaps and no gaps. That's the feature of the rectangular system. Part of its design, no overlaps, no gaps, just like the design of a subdivision. Look at a plat that's got 30 lots in it, 1 through 30 in it. You look at every lot in the control of the boundary. And it's a matter of equity that no one lot's lines has seniority over the one next to it, because they were created at the same time. From an equitable standpoint, one has as much located right as the other, as opposed to a junior and senior title situation, where this one was here first and this one came later. That's a sequential development. This system and the plat system are referred to as simultaneous. The lots happen in the same moment of time. These things happen in the same moment of time. There is no overlap, there is no gap. So, this guy right here, township, blown up is this. 6 miles, 6 miles. And if that was the design, there was a way to survey it. Consider the plat. You might have a boundary in. Next thing to do is you typically are going to survey the roads in, whether it be for construction or when you're finished with the whole thing to start staking the lots. The road goes in, it sets a control from the road and the boundary, you're going to start setting lot lines. Similar thing here too. Now, this is referred to as a manual of instruction. And when these things were done, with the design and a survey, they had such instructions coming to the General Land Office. And when I make reference to that, I'm talking back shortly after the Revolutionary War. That's how old this stuff is, this sense of design and the way to survey. And so this is what came out of the first published manual. The manual is a distinct term from instructions. Instructions are how things started. Special instructions to Surveyor General. Then we went to a manual. The first manual was published in 1851. And that's how this area here was surveyed. So these kinds of things, instructions, are from that. This is the screen not to write on.
Correct, yeah.
Sometimes I have had this displayed on the whiteboard and I scratch over the top of it. But I think it's important to see that what was done in this way of surveying, starting with some control lines and then concentrating it into smaller units, is again taking the design and how to survey it in order to control the error. That sounds smart. Rather than just get on one end and throw everything to one area, which we'll see was done, but that error was contained. So I'm going to take one more slide here, back here at section, township. I'm going to jump ahead now. One of those 6 mile squares, or each of those 6 mile squares, is shown here in your slide. Each one of those is 6 miles, and with each one of those are the 36 sections. That's how dense it is. Now, if you can appreciate that in a usual fashion of surveying, we want to have a sense of where our control is. And when we're thinking of traversing, we might make an attempt at traversing on the perimeter of something. And then from it inside, work to our topography survey or to our staking or things like that. You know, rather than having either no control or some single line and then just flying things out. If we have the chance, so please don't go back and tell your boss about Harrison says this is the way to do it. I'm saying when we have an opportunity, either through the GPS network or from conventional total station work, to have a control loop or polygon configuration, such that that controls the area by which is within it. This demonstrates the same thing. So this is how it was. This point right here is called the initial point, and that is the position by which the entire system begins with. Now, I said that there were 30 states that cover this, and boy, I'm going to forget for the moment how many initial points we have. Maybe I can find it here. That would be important to have here. Is it 31? Okay, 30 states, 31 initial points. So therefore, over the plate, over the various states, some have more than one, but then there's sometimes an initial point that covers several states. So do not associate the number of systems that we're talking about. We're on the Willamette system here. Don't confuse the number of systems being 31 with the number of states being 30. What I do mean to say is that for the sake of developing a system by which land was going to be conveyed from the federal government into the private sector, it was determined to put an initial point. I don't want to say arbitrarily, but it was subjectively determined where to put it based on the agricultural and demographic area that the surveyor was trying to determine how to deal with the settlers and facilitate land sale. So we find, and we'll look at that a little bit later when we get into our history, that this area for us was just west of downtown Portland. But regardless if it was in Portland or in Kansas or in Iowa, this is the way it went. An initial point went in the ground based on the surveyor's general determination, this personal one. Celestial observations were made, and that was the position based on a geographic coordinate. From that, true north, that was set in the ground. From that, true north is run. Principal meridian, that's the one that's going up and down. It's on true north. It's run north and south. It's given a name. So there's 31 names. Ours is Willamette. And as it was surveyed, section corners and quarter corners were set along it. So a contract went out, a bunch of guys got on that line, they turned north and up they went. Every 40 chains and every 80 chains, they set a monument. Boom, 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 boom. Then, establish standard parallels and guide meridians at 24 miles to control the convergence. So if you could appreciate that you get out here and you turn true north like we're supposed to do, it starts curving in. And if you didn't do this, which you see comes out here, this came out 6 miles, 24 miles, so does this. And we'll see that this top quarter does not match that quarter. So when the object was to control the convergence, rather than have these things just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to the top of our meridian, every 24 miles, he said, okay, let's get out there and start it again. Converge, converge, converge. Get out there and start it again. Every 24 miles, standard parallel was set. This area, up where I work, is the 6th standard parallel. That runs through Southeast 8th. The 5th standard parallel is the jurisdictional line between King County and Pierce County. Coming out of, we'll see a picture of it, coming out of the south end of the Sound at Fox Island. So you can appreciate that if we're 6 standard parallels times 24 miles each, we get a sense of how far we are north of Portland. That math works together. Survey, so here we have the control. You know the loop I was talking about and the plat? You've got a central one. Oh, perhaps I didn't mention the baseline. When the north-south meridian was done, the east-west baseline was done. That's given a unique name too. It's called baseline. And so we have the Willamette meridian and the baseline converging at the same point. And where I said that the meridian is a true meridian going to the pole, the baseline is a true line of latitude. So it's a big curve. And the manual gives instructions on how to survey a curve. So though we see it as straight, those surveyors at that time, they just didn't go down a quarter mile, plunge the scope, and go another half a mile, and then just keep doing that. They were constantly in one of 3 methods to be deflecting around as they're setting every half mile and mile coming along here in each direction. They're setting those quarters just like they did north and south. Setting those quarters and where they're kind of plunging the scope here or checking their running north and south or checking their true north orientation. The guys running east and west are actually running the curve. That's set up the control. Once the control is set, so here we have every half mile, these guys, these great big 24 mile squares have quarters, and section quarters set. They're the first things that go around. One contract, done an area at a time. Then start over. Come back here. This is where we're into here, number 4. Survey townships into 6 mile squares. You get on this, the instructions tell you commence at a standard corner on the baseline. This one out here, 6 miles, has already been set. You go out through the brush, 2 years later, you find that, what was done at that time, and you say, okay, I am on number 5. I am 6 miles west of this central meridian. Now I'm going to run true north 6 miles to the northwest corner of that township. Every 40 chains, every 80 chains, quarters go in the ground. Hello. Did I do
Just
that?
wiggle the mouse over there.
Wiggle the Now we're going to see something in line item 5 and 6 here that were an instruction that is transmitted from the general scheme down to the townships. I'm pointing out that we started from a found known quarter. We survey true north 6 miles, setting quarters and 40 and 80 chains along the way. We get to the northwest corner, we stop, and we turn east. Because we're going to set the control now. We're going to run a random line east. So they're taking a shot, and they're running for 6 miles going east. And the idea is to hit the found quarter there. Remember, these were set first. These were set first. We started on a found. We traversed north. Now we're going to traverse east. And we hope to close. We hope to check in. That's why it's referred to as a random line to intersect this north-south line. Along the way, they're setting temporary section and quarter corners. So when we see a little later how formidable those monuments were, and the accessories that were placed in each one, speaking of berry trees and things like that, you'll have an appreciation why they were temporary section and quarter corners along the line. Then when they get to this end, and they're looking, after 6 miles of traversing, and they're looking for the corner that was set once upon a time on that central ring. They expect to be within it 3.5 chains, whatever 3.5 times 66 is. That's their area of closure that's acceptable. If they're going east, they want to be north or south by 3.5 chains of that found corner. If they are, that's good news. They've closed. They jump to that corner, the found one, and then brush line all the way back on. Do I say it here? Hold the found corner on the meridian and run true line back to the west. You know, I kind of visualize a little triangle sliver in there. One was a random line going to the east, now we're on true line going back, because we were within the 3.5 chain tolerance. And as we go back, we're setting permanent section corners and quarter corners and setting the accessories that go with them. Typically, and this is what I found working in Oregon, they are bearing trees. We have some pictures of them here. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with that, what that looks like. But a substantial tree that the front bark is blazed off to the Cambian area of the tree, and it's scribed with particular information with a scribing tool, such that that evidence will grow over and heal and perpetuate for years and years and years. Principally because, at least in this area, you would choose an evergreen tree, and that pitch would preserve it. Corner might be long gone, but in a section corner there we would expect to find 4, one in each section, berry trees. In a quarter corner, we would expect to find 2, one in each section there. So, whereas we run back, and because we're setting them exactly at 40 and 40 and 40 and 40 for 6 miles, there's going to be some distance there when we get back to our northwest corner, the one we just left. And that's where that error is left. The excess or deficiency of the last 40 chains is left there. That's kind of a key point. We're going to see that error, excess, and deficiency is always left at the north and on the west of this system. Everything else within it, theoretically, should be a half mile. But because of this kind of convergence, and we're surveying square boxes, that you can't have curved lines and square boxes everywhere. We're going to continue this up and over, like we just talked about, up and over, up and over, up. Oh boy, here's the last one now. We get to the top, the north, continue the northwest from the north, run true north, from the northwest quarter, the 3rd township, that's right here. This is 1, 2, 3 township, northwest quarter is right there. So we have one more to do, which tells us to continue to run true line to the intersection of that control line, that standard parallel that we set. We're going to go to that, and we're going to find a corner up there. That corner that we find is called the standard corner. It's a standard corner because it was set on the standard parallel. But we're not going to hold it. In this instance, number 9 here, we're going true north up, and we're going to set a closing corner, noted here. The distinction between a closing corner is that the closing corner controls the north-south lines of the sections below it. The definition of the standard corner is that it controls the position of the sections going north. Now the distance east and west between them, and in the notes it was always noted how far it was in chains and links, showing again that it was closing. It was important that it close no farther north or south than that line. So the idea was to get on that line and then tie the corner that they found. The distance between them in our area is, I'm going to pick a number like 50 or 60 feet. In my area of town, there's on the west side of 405, south area, southeast area. And I mentioned to you earlier that the 6th standard parallel is southeast area. There's a parking lot called Wilburton Parking Lot. The standard corner is in the park and ride area, out of the street section. 49 feet to the, excuse me, that's the closing. 49 feet to the west is the standard corner, and it's missing. It's been there since I've been around the city, but through construction it's gone. But it's been well tied into our network, and we have lots of data to show where it was, and it's used in our calculations and retracements. So when I point out, what I'm talking about is this little jog up here. The jog there, this, you see the jog here? That jog exists in every one of those corners up through there. And it is a lesser degree within the control, the greatest degree in the extremes. But that's what we see as far as how to control the error. Now, I'm going to summarize again. We start at a node, we go up and over, check in, come back. Up and over, check in, and come back. We do that all the way up, and then we start out here another 6 miles, up and over, and check into the one that we started our discussion. Back, up, and over random line, back on true line. Same procedure there as it is any place over here. Now I'm going to go back in the slides. Here. It's almost a repeat. Again, these are published instructions. It's almost a repeat. We're going to take one of those 6-mile things. We just started there. We started there. This was the initial point. We went out and found the corner 6 miles away. We ran up 6 miles, setting each one of these as we went up. Came over random line, setting temporaries, checked in 3.5 chains, and then came back true line, setting each one, and left the error over here. So check it out. Subdivide the township into sections. Each one is a mile that we're talking about. We're going to commence at the standard corner of the township line. 80 chains west, 1 mile. And even though I'm just going to talk about this one tier, This whole thing applies to whether here, over, or here, and over, and so on and so forth. Run true north. Now this is an interesting thing, is that in the 1955 manual, I noted here, it says run true north, yet the current manual and the predecessor to the current manual, this is where I kind of cut my teeth over the last quarter century, says that it should be parallel to this. So there's a distinction. One's true north, which is a different bearing coming up here than this bearing over here. But at least the original instructions, and that's what we're talking about. The original design and how to survey. Field crew got on that south corner, they turned a celestial observation and they ran true north. That's what they were instructed to do. Go 80 chains to here, set the northwest corner, set in the quarter and 40 chains. Run a random line, just like we talked about for the 6 mile deal. Run a random line to the east to check in with what was found here. Now, if you can appreciate that the era of closure for the township was 3.5 chains, certainly for 1 mile it's a whole bunch less. The theory is the same. I mentioned here if closure is within tolerance. The manual called that the east-west line running this random line had to be plus or minus 1 chain, 100 links. 66 feet. Survey a mile, we want it to be within 66 feet. And north and south, that was the 3.5 chains on the other scenario. North and south, this distance that you check into here has to be within 100 links, equal to this distance here. So that these lines are equidistant. In today's manual, they use a little different criteria. By the way, I think that we would find that that's not to be confusing, because if we could find lands that were to be originally surveyed for the first time, we're given a manual to go out and do this system on lands that have not been surveyed before, federally owned lands, then we would follow those instructions, whether it be 73 or 2009 manual. Follow those instructions, and those instructions are a little different based on the things we've learned and the equipment we own. So what I wish to communicate here is that there was a tolerance for closure, and approximately what it was back then. Don't let that be a point of confusion of what one manual says then and what one says now. This is kind of important. If we check in, we're going to get on that corner, just like on the 6 mile scenario, go to the found corner, get on it, and come back on true line, come back to the west. We set the temporary quarter when we went out at 40 chains. Now we're going to set it midpoint. We know based on our error how far we were with respect to the 80 chains. If we were within 66 feet, we know if we're plus or minus the mile, the 80 chains, and so we divide that by 2, midpoint. That's where the quarter goes on the true line. It does not go expressly at 40 chains. The instruction was midpoint. Every plat, GLO plat that we see, it says 40. Most of the transcribed notes that we read says 40. So let's just believe that midpoint is 40. We find our way back to that northwest corner and up we come. Now, do you recall that when we got up here in the 6 mile breakdown or control scheme. We surveyed the 6 miles north, and then we found what I defined as the standard quarter. We tied it, but we set a closing quarter. So there's double quarters on standard parallels. That's a key component. There's 2 section quarters everywhere. Every section has, every section has 2 section quarters. One for the one below it, one for the one north of it. But only the ones north of it have quarter quarters. That in the original scheme, and never surveyed, that I know of, the quarter for the quarter south. When we set the standard parallels, we went every half mile, coming east and west. When we ran north, on the other slide, we found it and we tied it. Here, we're going to go north, we find it, and we move to it, just like we did over here. We hold that quarter. Again, this is on the townships, not on the township lines. Big deal here. I'm on a township line, I'm not on a standard parallel. Double corners on standard parallels, single quarters on township lines. So you run north, you find the corner, you jump to it, just like you would over here. Then, you run true line back down, and this quarter here, I think I'm down to this point here, goes in, you make darn sure, not midpoint, but 40 chains north of the southwest corner. You can see then that we've got, in this section here, which is true for this section or any of these in the top, that we've got, for this section, a southwest corner, 40 chains. We have another one, and 40 chains north, we have another one. But up here is the error. And we're going to find that over here too. So we're in the scheme of the design and how we survey. They're designed as 36 squares, but the way we survey to contain the errors, we're going to find every township is going to throw their errors up here and down here. And those are what are referred to as the fractional sections. They are what contain government lots. Government lots go to contain the error. I think I finished that. I'm going to come back now to section. We just got through talking about this. Each one of these sections, all through here, these guys can all be broken down, can all be described just like this. A quarter, a half, a quarter, rest 3/4 of a quarter in the same way. But when we get to 1 through 6, 7, down this tier here, we can't describe it in the same way because we have lotted sections. That's where the error has been thrown. And we see what those things look like in what's referred to as the original patent survey that came out of Washington, showing what the survey was about. And I think I have some samples of that in your slides. What was surveyed was less than what is actually depicted on the plat. I'm telling you that the surveyors did not set, if this was section 1 up here, I'm telling you they ran up here, they found the corner, they came true line back, and they set this quarter here, 40 chains north, but that probably left this short. And so in that, they set those, but they never came across and set that there. So what we see is that the patent survey not only shows this line, but shows lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4. And that's what's called cartographers or the mapping lot that's in there. It's drawn with areas and with dimensions, not surveyed. And that we find in the top tier, all through here, and all the way down there. Okay. The design is the scheme, how it was laid out. The design shows how the error is to be controlled, and the instructions go to support how it's to be surveyed. Certainly equipment was designated. When we read the contracts, it shows what guys are paid and who does what. But let me pause with that. That's the first check mark. Let's stop. You can take a hike for a few minutes, but please be back before 10 after. You got a body